It's Friday, May 16th, 2025, a Friday five-pack of what's trending, including a casual incitement of violence against President Trump, a congressman pleads for some fiscal sanity, and Ask or Tell Me Anything next on the AM Update. Made it through another week. May 16th. I can't believe it's over halfway through May. I don't know about you, but it seems like this month has just shot by so far. As always, I'd ask if you enjoy the AM Update, wherever you're listening, whether it's iTunes for most of you, Spotify for any more of you, wherever you're listening, whatever podcast platform, give me a 5-star review, and just thank you for listening. As I said, over halfway through the month of May so far this year, there have been 100 weekdays. 100 weekdays. I have just on this platform, on this channel, I have published 119 items of content. So 100 weekdays, and that's counting federal holidays as well, and other holidays. And I've published 119 pieces of content, almost 50 hours of content so far this year, just on this platform. You know, I was asked a couple of weeks ago, hey, who actually chooses the ads that run on iTunes? And I said a ferret on meth, because that is who chooses. If you are on iTunes and you're sick of the ads, $5 a month, you can subscribe to the premium edition of the AM Update and get rid of those ads if they just drive you nuts, as I'm sure sometimes they do. So appreciate your support, nevertheless, just by listening. Let's get into it without further ado. A Friday five-pack of stories. Yesterday, the Supreme Court heard oral arguments in the case of Trump v. a conglomeration of states who tried to push back at President Trump's executive order targeting birthright citizenship, which basically means that if you're pregnant on a flight from the UK to the United States, if you have the baby over international waters a half an hour earlier, it's a UK citizen. And if you have the baby a half hour later after you land in Newark, New Jersey, it's a citizen of the United States. Dual citizen, probably something like that. That's the framework, even if this is a kind of an absurd argument, an absurd example. That's basically what birthright citizenship is. It's a scam where you can just have babies on U.S. soil and they're automatically citizens. It's a complete and nutter just interpretation of the 14th Amendment. Oral arguments were held yesterday between this conglomeration of states and the Trump administration's attempt to end birthright citizenship. And more importantly, I don't think birthright citizenship is going away in this case at all. I don't. However, I think universal injunctions might just be going away, because the court was asked by the Trump administration to rule on whether lower courts in the 666th District of San Francisco, whether they can actually issue nationwide universal injunctions enjoining the entire country, basically putting an end to any sort of executive action that an executive might take. It's been incredibly harmful. It's been an overt sabotage of the Trump administration's agenda at the executive level. And there's some 600 and some hundred federal judges across the country, any one of them under the interpretation, whatever interpretation of the Constitution they're using, they can just issue a nationwide injunction and basically play God King. We've been over this at least 100 times so far this year. Well, here is Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas yesterday discussing the scourge of the universal injunction. This is definitely a mic drop moment.
General, when were the first universal injunctions used?
We believe that the best reading of that is what you said in Trump.
That's the voice of John Sauer, U.S. Solicitor General. 1963
was really the first universal injunction. There's a dispute about Perkins against Lucas Oil going back to 1940. And of course, we point to the court's opinion that reversed that universal injunction issued by the D.C. Circuit and said it's profoundly wrong. Now, if you look at the cases that the either party cite, you see a common theme. The cases that we cite, like National Treasury's Employment Union, Perkins against Lucas Oil, Frothingham in Massachusetts against Mellon, going back to Scott against Donald, and all of those are cases where the court considered and addressed the sort of universal, in that case, statewide issue of provision of injunctive relief. So when the court has considered and addressed this, it has consistently said you have to limit the remedy to the plaintiffs who appearing in court and complaining of that remedy.
So we survived until the 19 1960s without universal injunctions.
That's exactly correct. And in fact, those are very limited, very rare, even in the 1960s. It really exploded in 2007 in our cert petition in Summers against Earth Island Institute. We pointed out that the Ninth Circuit had started doing this in a whole bunch of cases involving environmental claims.
That is a mic drop right there. Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas. So when did the scourge of universal injunction actually start in our country? U.S. Solicitor General John Sauer points out, well, sometimes in the 1960s, but it didn't explode until 2007. And Clarence Thomas is like, so how in the world did this country survive until the 1960s with no such concept of universal injunctions? Well, former FBI Director James Comey posted something from some beach he was on. These were seashells that he found, that he laid out to spell the numbers 8647. 86 is restaurant vernacular for get rid of or nix. And 47, of course, stands for the 47th President of the United States. 8647, get rid of President Trump. The message from our former FBI director. Donald Trump Jr. saying on X, quote, just James Comey casually calling for my dad to be murdered. This is who the Democrat media worships. Demented. Absolutely. Absolutely that is. And that is a textbook definition, I think, in my opinion, Aaron's textbook definition of incitement to violence. James Comey has a massive platform and a massive following, and he's using that platform to spread the message, get rid of President Trump. To me, that seems like it's an incitement to violence. Congressman Chip Roy, who is a fighter to the very end, is begging and pleading for some fiscal sanity when it comes to the upcoming budget reconciliation package, or the big, beautiful bill. Here he is talking the other day on Will Cain's show on Fox News.
All we're talking about, to Ron John's point, Senator Ron Johnson, is $150 billion a year in savings in this bill out of a $7 trillion spend for your government. 10 years ago, our total spend was $3.6 trillion. Today, it is $7 trillion. We're already talking about crumbs, Will. If you want to save this country for our kids and grandkids, we're sitting and staring at $36 trillion in debt. It'll be $56 trillion, even if I get everything I want. So I've got to go fight to reform Medicaid so we can stop funding the able-bodied, stop the blue state money laundering, and restore fiscal sanity for the American people. If we do that, Trump will have the greatest economy ever. The SALT guys can get what they want. We can reform Medicaid. More vulnerable will be protected. There'll be more health care freedom, and we will reduce the deficit. That's a win for everybody if we'll just do it.
Congressman Chip Roy of Texas begging and pleading for some fiscal sanity in the upcoming budget reconciliation talks. And it's really daunting if you look into it on any level. It's really daunting what the future looks like if spending is not cut, if it's not reined in. I mean, I have to think that somewhere in the Treasury, some economist somewhere at some university has been trying to do calculations to figure out when it just becomes too burdensome to just service the debt alone, because it seems like our Congress is bound and determined to find the answer to that question. Is it when it reaches 40 trillion, 60 trillion, 80 to 100 trillion? Is that when it becomes just impossible to service the debt and we default, at least in short? And that basically means the collapse of the United States empire. It seems like Congress is bound and determined to figure out the breaking point for that. But if you start to look into what actually happens if we reach that point and we don't rein in spending, boy, the future looks pretty bleak. And that's Congressman Chip Roy trying to sound the alarm bells. Hey, while we have the opportunity, let's actually start cutting spending. Earlier this week, story number 4, at Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar, Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth had this message for troops stationed there.
What an absolute honor it is to be here amongst America's best alongside our allies. I look out into this audience and I truly see the eyes of American strength, the eyes of American deterrence, the eyes of Americans who put America first. So on behalf of a grateful nation, I want to thank you for your willingness to take the prime of your life to raise your right hand to defend our Constitution and our great nation. We salute you. We thank you and your families these 6,000 or 7,000 miles away.
Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth thanking the troops stationed at Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar. And finally, this from the Babylon Bee. Every once in a while, they make good points. Frequently, they make great points.
I've been a Nazi as long as I can remember. I believe all the standard Nazi stuff. I hate minorities and undesirables. I think Aryans should rule the world. The Third Reich shall rise again. All the classics. But it's not as fun to be a Nazi anymore. When they started calling Elon Musk a Nazi and Trump and, pretty much every Republican, it made it a lot harder for me to stand out. It's like I go out in public and I'm like, hey, everyone, I'm a Nazi. And they're like, big deal. Everyone we don't like is a Nazi. It makes me feel less special.
That goes on for another few minutes. Another hit from the Babylon Bee. When everybody's a Nazi, no one is. When we come back, it's going to be your turn to ask or tell me anything. That's next. Ask or tell me anything. Ask me any news story you want. No. Ask me any question you want. Tell me any news story that needs covered that I didn't get to. We'll begin with Matt Wells. The big, beautiful bill has a provision to allow the theft of land for carbon capture pipelines that Iowans and South Dakotans have fought for years now. Do you oppose the bill? I think there's a lot of junk in this bill. I think there's a lot of things that I wouldn't call beautiful. And I oppose carbon capture pipelines. Here's the thing, Matt. I don't think that Congress would be acting much different if we were talking about a President DeSantis right now. I think all the same problems would exist. Maybe even more so, because to some degree, DeSantis, at this point, post-Trump assassination attempts, DeSantis on some level, unless you just hate President Trump, or you just hate him personally, he's not as likable as Trump is right now. He becomes an easier target to shirk, because that's how shallow we are as a people. That's how shallow Congress is. So you might even be having worse problems with Congress, if that's even fathomable. See, Matt, I don't think that you really care about carbon capture. I really don't believe that anymore. Matt, when you came up to me at DeSantis's announcement event 2 years ago, this May, and talked my ear off for 10 minutes about how much you love the day job, love AM Update, you wouldn't have had the stones then to call me and my day job low IQ like you did a few days ago. And now you're in my comments here trying to act like you're asking a good faith question. I don't believe that for 1 minute. See, Matt, I have changed. I have. Since 2 Mays ago. Change can be good, change can be bad. I've grown up a little bit, matured a little bit. I had to make my peace with the fact that the world is not the way that I thought it was. Sometimes that can be good, sometimes that can be bad and frustrating. But I had to make my peace with that. Last July, was it July 13th? I started to think maybe the world is not the way that it was, because I thought what President Trump did after getting shot, standing up, the bravery and chutzpah, intestinal fortitude, whatever you want to call it, that showed me something about him that I didn't think existed. And I thought maybe the world is not the way that I thought it was. And at about midnight, the day after the election, it was confirmed the world is not the way that I thought it was. That can be good in some ways. That can be frustrating in others. But I made my peace with that. Matt, you have not. So that's why you're in my comments one day on one account, calling me low IQ. And then in my comments another day on another account, trying to ask an earnest question about policy and principles. You don't give two figs about carbon capture. You don't. And Matt, I'm saying this, I've said this to you in the past. I've given you, even when you were starting to get a little prickly about the way things were going, even prickly in other comments, I gave you the maximum benefit of the doubt. because I thought this is a guy who's put in the work on a lot of different areas. And you know what? He deserves to be cut a little bit of slack. Well, that accommodation, it's been clear that accommodation doesn't cut both ways. I've had to mature and grow up as a now 32-year-old. And you're probably 50 or 60. And you've just decided to sit in your feces because the world isn't changing the way that you wanted it to. So we're just going to go and poop post on X all day. You have to accept the world the way that it is, not the way that you want it to be. Not the way that you thought it should have been. Not the way that you think it's going, the way that it is. Now, you can't stay there. You have to do the most good that you can with the leverages and tools that you have available, the platforms that you have available. You can't just stay in the realist territory. That it has to move somewhere. But you just cannot be an eternal pessimist. I'm seeing a lot of people who claim to be right-wing who are just perpetually aggrieved about basically everything. Perpetually aggrieved. Whining. Crying. Think that nothing is ever good enough. Oh, that sounds like a leftist. So, Matt, thanks for listening, even though I doubt you actually are. Next, let's go to this one. Algorithmic binary code says, sounded like Representative Sri Thanadar, still not sure how to say his name, don't really care, was drawing a gross point blank. Drawing a gross point blank. Very nice. Yeah, he didn't know. So somebody, I can't remember. Oh, it's Dirk. It's one of my chief critics. He actually had something helpful to say. Dirk, on another comment thread, said, Detroiter here, and while I suspect many in the area may not know all 5 points or which order they're in, Grosse Pointe Park, Grosse Pointe Farms, Grosse Pointe Woods, Grosse Pointe Shores, that the representative for this area doesn't know them perfectly illustrates the low standards Democrat voters have. That's from Dirk, who says he is from Detroit, and confirmed that, yes, that congressman should know the Grosse Pointe cities. Country Squire says the only act of obedience that saves the lost is placing faith in Jesus Christ as Savior and doing God's will that you believe on his Son. That one act of obedience and submission is a pass or fail, and everything else is extra credit. So, if it is an act of obedience and submission, an act, not a philosophical assent, not a mental capitulation, but an act of obedience. An act of obedience. What does that mean? That's the catalyst, the action, the movement towards a changed life, not because the changes in your life are what save you, but because what you did, or what your Savior did, I should say, that changes you. So yes, good works, in that sense, the sense that you're pointing out here, yes, extra credit, but it should just be an outflow of the initial act of obedience and submission. That should always be the point here. And if those good works don't follow from that initial act of obedience or submission, it maybe wasn't an act of obedience or submission to begin with. Thank you, Country Squire. CL Redacted said, how in the world am I supposed to watch the overtime? The overtime is not live. Also, this is my side gig. You can tweet me at DEACE producer for day job related questions. I'm just teasing you, but the overtime is not live. Follow Truth has a quote from A.W. Tozier, God's Pursuit of Man. Quote, real faith must always mean more than passive acceptance. I wish I would have read this right after Country Squire's submission, because Country Squire didn't mean to put you on blast or anything. I was just trying to actually enhance the point that you were making and the words that you used. But A.W. Tozier sums up what I try to sum up in about 2 minutes and about 10 seconds. Real faith must always mean more than passive acceptance. Right on the money. Yep. Comfortable Bribe said, have you seen the videos of some dude saying he's the real Pope and the successor to both Jesus and Muhammad? Yes. And I think he's a joke. Jim Stalker has this from Kash Patel. He posted this on the 15th. So that would have been Thursday morning. New from the FBI, I can confirm reports that our FBI teams and partners foiled an attempted ISIS attack on one of our U.S. military bases in Warren, Michigan. The individual, Anmar Abdul-Majid Mohammed Saeed, plotted a mass shooting at the U.S. Army's Tank Automotive and Armaments Command facility before multiple undercover law enforcement officers obtained information of his plans. Saeed was arrested this week and will now face charges of supporting a foreign terrorist organization, among others. Wow. Ammar Abdul-Majid Mohammed Saeed. Well, how did he get into this country? It's the first question everybody should be asking. All right. Maybe one more. Toby Vaughn has this. He was asking me the other day why Mohammed bin Salman, that would be the crown prince of Saudi Arabia, why he seems to have such a bromance with President Trump. Because of all three places that President Trump visited this week, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, United Arab Emirates, I mean, he got a freaking king's welcome in all three of those Middle Eastern countries. I mean, the Burj Khalifa lit up in red, white, and blue. Like the flag, like the actual flag. The Burj Khalifa in Dubai lit up in the American flag for President Trump's visit to the UAE. I mean, that's just so bizarre to see. But of all the visits, it seems like the head of state that was most genuinely happy and jubilant to see President Trump was Mohammed bin Salman, Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia. And so Toby was asking me the other day, hey, do you know why these guys have such a bromance? And then he sent this video. I watched about 2 minutes of it. Apparently, I saw something about a Saudi connection with the 2017 Las Vegas massacre. I saw it way back then, and I hadn't seen anything reported on it since, so I wasn't sure if it was just happenstance. I wasn't sure what it... Anyway, this video purports that President Trump gave a heads up to MBS, that's the Crown Prince, that what happened, what transpired in the Las Vegas shooting, the Las Vegas massacre, was not planned to be a mass shooting at first. It was actually planned to be an assassination attempt on Mohammed bin Salman. That's what it was supposed to be. But Trump warned him, got him out of there, and I guess it turned into a mass shooting. I listened to this video, and it just seems like Gnosticism to me, special knowledge. You know, crazier things, well, I'm not sure crazier things have happened. Crazy things have happened. I'm willing to listen now. When in the past, I would have just completely dismissed it. But to me, stuff like that always smacks of just Gnosticism. I've got a special knowledge. A special dispensation of truth that not everybody has access to. That's the way it strikes me. I could be wrong, but that's it. And that's going to do it for another week on the AM Update. Thank you for all your questions and stories. Tomorrow is going to be another edition of No Suck Saturday. 5 stories we think don't suck, and study through C.S. Lewis's Mere Christianity. That's coming up tomorrow. Hope you have a wonderful weekend. Back at it again on Monday.